Really glad to see you here tonight. I see neighbors and friends and book group friends and friends. Tonight, hopefully you all have a handout. This handout will be a guide not only so you know where I am and how long I'm going to talk. You go, oh my gosh, how much more of this? But also you won't have to scribble down the information that I'm giving you, because it's all here, and so you can refer to this if you're planting a garden, or the information's here. So here I have this one just to show people. I don't think I need to refer to it. It'll save you. Anybody else need them? Because I'm sure. No. Why don't you get a couple? We'll just leave them here if people come in. Thank you.
That's okay. She went to get more.
Yeah. So tonight is presentation is called Creating an Ornamental Wildflower Pollinator Meadow Garden. That is a lot of words, but they're important because pollinator gardens, people think you just throw seeds and they happen, and that's why I call it an ornamental meadow garden, because it's really a garden using all these native plants, but still has to be tended. There's still a maintenance factor, but the plants are, it's a really exotic, and the project that I'm going to show you was the first one I'd done of these, and I don't get to do too many, but of this scale. But the thing is about this garden is you can take the information and use it in smaller scale. How many of you have maybe old properties in town? A couple, yeah? Anything. Old. And there's antique and there's old, and some of you have some sizable lots where maybe a lot of the lawn could be converted. And I'm going to start the lecture now. And I had my knee replaced a few months ago, so I'm going to sit for a lot of it. But if anybody has questions, hold to the end, and I'd be glad to deal with them then. So here we go. All right. So I've divided this up into 3 types of natural. So the first one are field meadows. Like this is the Wayside Inn, right? I love walking that path. There's a path that goes back here. My laser pointer doesn't work with the new technology. But so this is a field meadow, and you can kind of see just the way it divides up. You can see from the different colors, the different groups of plants, the way they've colonized the space. Here's another example. And sometimes I recommend actually people to a simple way is of letting your lawn kind of just go natural. It really does increase your bird population, but you have to do it in a way so your property doesn't end up looking abandoned. And you still need to mow it at least once or twice a year to keep the forest from recapturing it. And this is where I suggest if you did something, I have a client that did a part of it. So we did ornamental gardens, but a part of a periphery was unmown. And even so there's actually a trail around it that's mown around it, and the shape is determined. So again, it looks determined. It's not like you're neglecting your property. So you could do something like this. You may have seen this. This is on 126 in Wayland. So this is a great way. That is a meadow. There's probably planted a few things in it, but it's essentially, this is a wild meadow. Let the birds do it. But the wall and the mown strip at the street tells you that it's intentional. Enjoy it, intentional. And then there's the flower garden using native plants, which are a lot tamer. Like this kind of garden. Now this garden is actually attached to the one I'm going to show you. And this is high season where the plants are tall, but it's looking out. This is the meadow out there that I'm going to be showing you, the Pollinator Meadow Garden. But this garden has many plants, it has the same color scheme. I repeated the color schemes. But these are, tamer plants, plants that don't necessarily roam so much. And the scale is different, and it's a garden. So a lot of using some native plants and non-native plants. And then we go to this garden. So the homeowner had just planted this privacy screen, and they'd gotten some trees in there that the caveat is to keep them limbed up as they grow so that light will come through. And you'll notice, before I get in here, I notice that I have shrubs in the background. They bloom earlier than the meadow. So as these plantings get larger, there are plants that bloom in the, there's winterberry in there that will, be there for the winter. Witch hazel was off to the side. And they had some existing rhododendrons and some rhodies and other places that I just moved into that corner to kind of polish it, finish it. And then I added the dogwoods. There are dogwoods in the other part of the property to connect. So this is in early spring. Doesn't look like very much. Things are starting to come up. This is the second year. We did some bulb plantings, but not a lot. But by now, there's probably a ton of them. There's also lupin. So the plants that are listed are on your, and this is a little later in the summer, you can get a feeling for the scale, as that person is trying to keep the Joe Pye weed, which is that tall pink thing, from taking over the entire garden. And that's where the maintenance comes in some of these ornamental pollinator gardens, is that the plants are really wild. And some of them are very aggressive. They just don't know you're not supposed to take over the whole place. So you have to go and cull them. So for some reason, I have, okay, thought I had captions on these. Okay, all right. So what we have here, what page, where are we on the slides? Because I can point out some of these. Could I borrow yours for just a second? Thank you. All right, so this is the Filipendula. I think we're on, what slide are we on? I wasn't paying attention because I was talking about this. Well, I'll identify the plants by pointing them out as we go along, because we go into a part where we get choice plants. So, but you can see the exuberance of these plantings. And this is the overview, because I always like to start showing you what these meadow looks like before I'm talking about the plants. So now you can tell you're in the fall, and it's changed, whereas you had this whimsy, and this is one of the hydrangea that's blooming because there are these shots through the lower plants. But you get this whimsy of some of these giant coneflowers. This gives you a sense. Just moving on, and this is what it looks like in winter. And a lot of the native grasses that are in there, you don't really notice them until all of a sudden they're the stars. Although you do see this kind of haze, floating through in late July and August. And I was lucky enough that the homeowner found this wonderful piece of sculpture. It was perfect. But even in this time of year, and this is showing from the more tame garden, showing how they're connected, And this is a tamer version of a grass, the dwarf fountain grass, versus the grasses that are in the meadow that tend to spread a little bit. So briefly, this is based on this, I design these patterns and drifts based on the way plants colonize in nature. And I figured that out looking at meadows, being atop a mountain in New Hampshire in fall and looking out at the colors that just delineated what, the shapes and then how the plants were interconnected. And I went, okay, so it starts with 1, and then it goes to 2, and then it goes to 3, and that's a mass. We talk about masses in design. And then we have these drifts of and I like to call them 4, 5, and 6, or 7, 8, 9. I mean, in this garden, I was using drifts, and some of those plants have 9 and 7 plants. I like to call this shape a kite with a tail. Although, and if you think about it, so the plant's really happy here. Here it is, and it says, okay, if I go this way, I have more water, right? So I'm going this way. And then they add another one, and then it says, oh, this is happier for me to go this way. And then more, and then more. So that's it, and with interlocking. So that's the basis of the design. And then you can see how they interlock. And this is showing you the color, but this pattern echoes nature. So this pattern and this idea, obviously those are 7, 9s, those are long drifts, but you can do it with 3 and 5. With 1s and diagonals here and there. So you can do it in a smaller garden with the same idea. And this plan was a little looser than the plans I normally do because I knew I was going to have to kind of work it in. But essentially it's all these interlocking drifts and the color palette as a guide. So that's how, the one that you saw earlier, that's how the base is how it started. So obviously in April, there's not much going on in the meadows. So we bring in a non-native plant like the King Alfred, daffodil or narcissus. And, I've got all this information about bloom time and the height and spacing for all the plants that you see. So you don't have to write this down, you can just circle. And then I like to add, and I like to do this in the meadow gardens, the Allium Globemaster, because in May there's not much going on. There really isn't, and we like to see, we got kind of, we're accustomed to seeing something. So just having a field where there's not much going on doesn't bother me too much, but it is neat if you can have color through there. So that when the Baptisia, the yellow version, starts, there's this lovely contrast, and all of a sudden, because of the way colors work, they really intensify each itself. And I just want to make a note about the pollinators, that usually we think of pollinators as bees, but it's beetles and wasps and hummingbirds and flies and what did move? And all of those kinds of things. So when you see, things that are flying around other than a honeybee, don't be alarmed. They're actually helping because they're eating there's a balance in nature, and what they're eating, they're pollinating, but they're also eating other bugs. And the thing is, the birds really rely on these pollinators for feeding their young. And that, if you want to keep the bird populations healthy, they need to be able to feed their young high protein, and that's where the pollinator plants are attracting the insects that they eat and therefore feed to the birds. So if you're doing that, you will find that your bird population increases. And that's why also something as simple as letting lawn grow in between. So the lupins are next. And again, this is a second year. At some point, the lupins will spread, and the homeowner was actually taking seed and throwing it, so it'll crop up. And in a garden like this, movement's all right. You want things to move. You just don't want things to overtake. Like, for instance, the Shasta daisies at some point will have to be culled and given to somebody else, right? Or planted somewhere else. So the Shasta daisy is this. And the Rebeckia Goldstrom is this. Okay, you're familiar with this black-eyed Susan. You can see it in combination, and also I happen to show a fall picture against the panicum grass, so you can kind of get a sense of that combination too. So it's fun being a designer because you're painting in color in time, and things, you want to make sure that when things are blooming, that they're seen next to each other and creating these great color pairings and shape pairings. But you also want to make sure that it's working 2 months from then, for the early spring, that if it's not going to cover up something that may be behind it. And this is just a note about the color palette for this garden. As you can see, it's yellow-orange coming across here. You can see this color palette range. And also white is at the center of it. So the thing about color, just in passing, because we don't have a lot of time, but is that on the color wheel, colors that you find that are opposite each other actually intensify each other when they're placed next to each other. And it doesn't have to be like, for instance, orange and blue. When you place orange and blue together, the blue is really vibrant. You don't have to have 50% orange and 50% blue in your garden. You can have a lot more blue and a bit of orange. And the orange doesn't have to be bright orange, although some of them are really kind of nice. They can be coral. They can be something that's really pale. As long as they have just a tinge of that color, that'll make the garden sing. And then the third one to add is one that's an adjacent color that pairs with them well. And that's what makes color combinations, really work. We've got this gold, we've got pink here, which is red. Oops, what's this? Oh. Apple decided I needed to.
I need to leave a review.
How about not now? I ran things twice in this computer today, so it wouldn't do things like that. I guess, Apple has its way. Anyway, you can see there are 3 colors there, and that kind of pinky color, which is coming from the grass, is part of the triad of colors. And that's intended, it's thought out. Your head will start to go crazy. So this is that idea of complementary colors and the split complementary. So back to this. This is a Filipendula, this one here. She is wonderful. She gets really tall, and she likes to romp. But see how feathery? It is beautiful. And she's combined, you can see, again, you can see through her because a veil plant kind of thing. You can see that hydrangea, which will eventually be, more in that space because it's one that wants to be 8 by 8. And then you have the Thalictrum there, and then you have some of the tall, which we'll show you. The Heliopsis is this one. And I actually planted that one in afterwards because I came and looked at the plants and said, oh, look, there's this big sea of green right there at this time of year. It's perfect for having something in there that'll just fill the palette and work. So that was added when I came back later and I looked at it the next season and went, oh, we need something there. Liatris is this. And it weaves through. It's a low-growing plant. So in July, so I tend to have it towards the front so you see it. But again, it's that pattern. The Robinia, I didn't seem to have a good slide of it, but you get it's this one. It's that one that looks like a coneflower that kind of looks like a rocket or an umbrella. But again, it's a different, the yellows that bloom at the same time, I have like 3 different yellow plants. One, so the yellow-orange, so that they're still doing the pattern, but they don't all have to be the same plant. But you don't want to do that too often, but it helps. This is that thalictrum or meadow rue. I like to actually use this plant in front of kitchen windows. You know how they're tall? Because in July, it comes up and it's like 6 or 7 feet tall, and you can look out your window and you see it. It blooms for a while. And it's again, one of those veil plants, you can see through it. And then after it goes by, you just cut the big stalks and it's got a nice base. But in a meadow, look how it's combining. I mean, they're just these happy plants. And this Rudbeckia maximum, look how tall that is. And it has these wonderful kind of silvery, fuzzy leaves. But isn't that wonderful? That, in a regular garden, having a plant that is, up to 80 inches, which is like, what, 7 feet, 8 feet? It's hard to accommodate that, right? And this is where this, ornamental meadow garden gives you an opportunity to have these plants that get tall. And they have these, it's like they're dancing. And that's what's exciting, I think. You get more of a dancing plants within, it's a very happy meadow. But, this kind of scale plants are harder in tinier gardens. You could still do it in a garden that's a third that size, but, and again, the grasses are there. They're filling in. They're companions. This is the eupatorium, or Joe Pyeweed. If it starts going that way, it needs to come out. And I have Boltonia in here and there, which is this plant. It blooms late. It's a kind of a skinny plant that's about 3 feet to 4 feet that blooms in late summer, but it's really great to kind of poke it here and there to give nice contrast against that yellow or pink or something. And this is the, now sometimes people think goldenrod, is sneezeweed. Well, it's actually not. This particular solidago is not the one that everyone's so allergic to. There's another variety that I think that actually has a common name of sneezeweed or something. But, it adds a lot. It's another one that moves a lot, as do these asters. I mean, these were done in great clumps. So, there's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I mean, the shapes of these plants to get the drifts, it's not just straight across. It's like 1, 2, 1 back, forward, back. It's that zigzag pattern. That's what creates these kind of long drifts, or the groups that were masses around. And the aster bluebird that floats through there and is so great with the black-eyed Susan. And of course, in the back there, we have the Joe Pyeweed. And you don't even know that this grass is in there until almost October. It just does a supporting role. These other plants are dancing around, and it's like, a ballerina where you've got the male dancer is holding and she twirls around and does all this stuff, but he's just there. Although in modern dance, it could be another female too. Doesn't always have to be a male that's holding the and allowing the person to float around and do. But in October, it starts to come alive, and this has the red tips that are just starting to show a little bit. And it depends on when those cold times come. I come back to this garden periodically, but I've never caught it when that grass is that brilliant red. I've yet to catch that time. But again, you can see the panicum, prairie fire. You can see that one floating through. And that, of course, shows up as this kind of misty thing in the middle of summer. So I hope you get to be inspired when you think about looking at your own landscape. If you have a big part of a field that you mow all the time, but maybe you might consider, having it either go, quote, wild and making it look like it's not abandoned, or doing something like this. And you have the plants, you could do it yourselves. You have the plants, and it might take a little thought, but you know the patterns. But the thing is, using your imagination and putting these colors together, and know that this combination of Liatris always works really well when it's combined with the Black-Eyed Susan. And the Black-Eyed Susans bloom for a long time. The Liatris only blooms for 3 weeks if you're lucky. But it has the same kind of colors as the coneflowers that come through here. And the others that repeat. And the pink, and then this one, the panicum, you can see this is just starting to color up. And of course, there's the queen of the meadow back there. And the white poking through is that hydrangea quickfire. And then these kinds of, the Shasta daisy and the coneflower and the Black-Eyed Susans, they all work really well together. But the pink, little pink that's repeating up here is, remember that pink and red are the same. And a pale pink and a darker magenta pink are all part of the same palette. So if you say your garden is, yellow gold and maybe blue purple and red, you haven't seen any, quote, red in this garden, have you? But there's a color relationship that makes them work well together. There's another shot of this. From different areas. And what's neat is that these pictures don't convey the sound of the birds and the hum of happy things in the garden, or the smells. I mean, there's a fragrance. These plants most of them are very subtle, but they're fragrant. So when you're out in the garden there, and if you're working in it too, you get the treat of hearing all these things, especially in the mornings, in the late afternoons, the bird song and the insects. And then there's a rustle of breeze sometimes. So there's, all your senses are treated in a garden like this. And of course, the scale is so fun. Even the seed heads work. These seed heads, they work well too. And this is showing you the edge of this garden and then the tamer one. But you see the same colors. It's the same palette, and actually the same system of of plants. It's just not 7s and 9s and 5s. It's 3s and an occasional 5. This was a 5. That was like 3. There's a few onesie twosies, but they're repeated. There are a lot of the triads there. And these are the white dogwood that are repeated in the other garden. So the whole point of gardening and caring for your land is to have fun with it and to find ways for it to give back to your life. I find that going out into the garden and looking to see what's new is a really joyful process. And actually research has shown that, we all know that gardening is good for you, but there's a physical thing that happens that one woman talked about as a mini restoration experience, where you find maybe you're looking at a flower or listening to the breezes, your senses are activated, and you start getting really involved, and your breath starts to get deeper, and you start to relax, and you're actually connecting with nature. Studies have shown that, lo and behold, it's good for us. So have fun with gardens, larger, smaller, simpler, more complex, whatever you can handle, and enjoy. Thank you very much.